Welcome to Deep Tech Dharma, an autonomy thesis. Imagine, imagine you're a doctor working in a hospital ward,
Mm.
but not today. We're talking way back, over 100 years ago, early 1900s.
Right, a completely different world for medicine.
Exactly. No advanced scanners, no modern treatments, just honestly a lot of despair.
Hmm.
And you have this patient with advanced cancer, but then something totally bizarre happens.
A happy accident.
Yeah, exactly. Your cancer patient catches just a run-of-the-mill viral infection, like a bad flu, maybe a stomach bug. And as their body fights off this everyday virus, you notice something impossible. Their tumor is actually shrinking.
I mean, it sounds like medical folklore, doesn't it?
It really does.
But it was entirely real. It was documented over and over again in the historical medical records. The virus, completely by chance, was attacking the cancer.
And naturally, the medical community saw this and thought, we need to harness that power. I mean, the dream of taking that accidental biological collision and turning it into a precise, targeted medicine has literally been chased for a century.
A literal 100 years.
Right. But for just as long, it stayed completely out of reach.
Wow.
Because building a virus that is safe, precise, and manufacturable without it just going totally rogue in the human body was practically impossible.
Yeah, the technology simply didn't exist to match that ambition because biology is incredibly complex, and until very recently, we just didn't have the tools to rewrite it with that kind of precision.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our mission today is to dive into a stack of sources detailing the story of a company called Nucleovir Therapeutics.
Mm.
They're a startup based in Bengaluru, founded pretty recently, late 2024, and they believe they can finally engineer that cancer-hunting virus.
Which is a huge claim.
A massive claim.
Mm-hmm.
But they aren't just doing it with, traditional lab work. They're using artificial intelligence to design biology that nature never wrote. So in this deep dive, we are going to explore exactly how they plan to aim this at the deadliest cancers humanity faces, and why doing this in India represents a major shift in global healthcare sovereignty.
Yeah, it's a fascinating convergence of tech and biology.
It really is.
Yeah.
But I think to really understand why we even need an engineered virus, we first have to talk about the limits of our current drugs.
Definitely. Because over the last decade or so, the story of cancer treatment has been completely dominated by a revolution called immunotherapy.
Right.
Drugs like Keytruda and Opdivo, they completely changed the landscape of oncology.
I think most people have probably heard the term immunotherapy, but let's de-jargon what it actually does.
Yeah.
Because it's actually brilliant.
It really is.
For decades, the standard was chemotherapy, which is essentially putting poison in the body and just hoping the cancer dies before the patient does.
Yeah, highly toxic.
Exactly. But immunotherapy asked a totally different question, right?
Yeah.
Like, what if we don't poison the tumor, but just let the body's own immune system do what it evolved to do?
The mechanism is, it's elegant in its simplicity. Cancer cells are tricky. They survive by putting the brakes on your immune system.
Okay.
They send out these chemical signals that basically tell your passing immune cells to stand down. Like, nothing to see here. Sneaky.
Very. So immunotherapy drugs essentially act as molecular wire cutters. They cut those brakes, they block those stand-down signals, which allows the body's own immune cells to suddenly recognize the tumor and destroy it.
And for some diseases, this was a true miracle. Melanoma, for instance, went from being a near-certain death sentence to a highly survivable condition for a lot of people. It fundamentally rewrote the medical textbooks.
That is the success story, yeah.
Yeah.
But the oncology world is grappling with a pretty stark reality right now.
Right, the brick wall.
Exactly. That massive breakthrough hit a brick wall. When you look at solid tumors, which, by the way, make up the vast majority of cancers, these immunotherapy drugs, on their own, only help about 20 to 40% of patients.
Wow. That leaves a lot of people behind.
It does. And in some specific types of cancer, that number plummets into the single digits. This is where we run into a major biological hurdle, and it introduces two terms that are really crucial for you to understand if you want to know where cancer research is heading. And those are hot tumors and cold tumors.
Right. So a hot tumor is one that is already swarming with immune cells.
Okay, so the body knows it's there.
Yes, the body knows something is wrong. The immune cells have traveled to the site, but their brakes are on. So when you give the patient an immunotherapy drug, those brakes come off, and the immune cells are right there, ready to attack.
But a cold tumor is completely different. The immune system literally cannot see it. The cells aren't just restrained, they are completely absent from the tumor site.
If we look at the mechanics of why this matters, I mean, releasing the brakes on a car doesn't do you any good if the car isn't even on the road.
Right.
If the immune cells are completely absent from the tumor environment, giving a patient these incredibly expensive advanced immunotherapy drugs accomplishes absolutely nothing. The immune system remains completely blind to the threat.
Let me put an analogy to this to make it crystal clear. Think of your immune system as a highly trained army.
Okay.
With a hot tumor, the army is surrounding the enemy base, but their commander told them to hold their fire. So immunotherapy is the order to attack.
Nice, yeah.
But with a cold tumor, the enemy base is basically wearing an invisibility cloak. It doesn't matter if you unleash the army and tell them to attack with everything they have because they don't know where to point their weapons. They just wander right past the threat.
That visualization captures the core of the biological problem perfectly. And the real gut punch in the data is that cold tumors are not rare exceptions.
No, they're not.
They are the rule for some of the most devastating diseases on Earth. We're talking about glioblastoma, which is a highly aggressive brain cancer, alongside pancreatic cancer, colorectal cancer, triple-negative breast cancer.
So brutal diseases.
Millions of patients a year cycle through standard treatments for these cold tumors and come out no better.
The survival numbers on these are just tough to read.
The statistics on glioblastoma alone show just how stagnant progress has been. The median survival rate is just 14 to 16 months from diagnosis. Only 5 to 7% of patients are alive at 5 years. I mean, think about it. We've had a century of incredible oncology progress. We've mapped the human genome, we have advanced robotics, and that survival number for glioblastoma has barely moved an inch.
So the entire next wave of cancer research, billions of dollars and thousands of careers, is circling one single desperate question. How do you turn a cold tumor hot?
Exactly.
How do you rip off that invisibility cloak so the immune system can do its job? Which leads us directly to the star of our show today, oncolytic viruses, or OVs. If the core problem is stripping off that cloak, this engineered virus is the mechanism.
Right. Oncolytic viruses are highly engineered biological machines. They're designed to execute a very specific two-punch combination. And I should say they are a world away from the random infections doctors observed a century ago.
Right. They're not just a random flu bug. So let's break down that two-punch mechanism. The first punch is direct killing. How does a virus actually do that without harming the rest of the body?
Unlike a random virus you catch on the subway, an OV is genetically modified to recognize and slip inside only tumor cells.
Only the tumor cells.
Exactly. It looks for specific receptors on the surface of a cancer cell that healthy tissue just doesn't have. Once it gets inside the cancer cell, it does what viruses do best. It hijacks the cell's internal machinery, forces it to multiply the virus rapidly, and eventually causes the cancer cell to burst open from the inside out.
So it's physically destroying the cancer cell itself.
Yes.
But it's the second punch that actually solves our cold tumor problem, right? The immune alarm.
This is the crucial part. As those tumor cells rupture and burst open, they don't just die quietly, they spill all their internal contents. Tumor-specific proteins, cellular debris, viral particles, all of it into the surrounding tissue.
Okay.
It's the biological equivalent of firing a massive distress flare into the night sky.
I love that image. The virus forces the invisible enemy to suddenly light itself on fire.
When that flare goes up, the immune system that had been completely ignoring the tumor suddenly notices it. The cold tumor instantly turns hot.
Wow.
The immune cells rush in, see all these spilled cancer proteins, and learn to recognize them as dangerous. In effect, the virus turns the tumor into a vaccine against itself. It primes the entire body to hunt down cancer cells that may have already spread anywhere else in the patient.
That is wild. And the data on this from the sources is just, it's wild. When you pair these oncolytic viruses with those immunotherapy drugs we talked about earlier, the checkpoint drugs acting as molecular wire cutters, the results shift dramatically.
Because you're addressing both problems.
Right. You are firing the flare to bring the army in, and then you are cutting the brakes so they can fight.
The synergistic effect is undeniable. The sources show that tumors shrink in 39 to 62% of patients when you combine the virus with the checkpoint drugs,
Which is huge.
compared to roughly 18% for the checkpoint drugs alone.
So this engineered virus is really a guided infiltration. Let's put this in perspective for a second. Chemotherapy is basically carpet bombing. You poison everything and hope the cancer dies first.
Right.
But this virus sneaks behind enemy lines, targets the specific rogue cells, blows them up, and then radios the coordinates to the main army. But I have a question here.
Go for it.
Viruses mutate. I mean, it's what they do to survive. How do we engineer a virus to be so deadly to cancer and so incredibly precise without it mutating and going rogue and attacking healthy human tissue?
That is the million-dollar question. And engineering that level of safety and precision requires a convergence of technologies that simply didn't exist even 5 years ago.
Okay.
And understanding how we do that now explains why nucleovir therapeutics and the specific moment in time we find ourselves in is so critical.
Our sources actually point to three massive shifts converging at once to make this possible. The first one we just covered, which is that oncolytic viruses are finally maturing into a real combination therapy modality.
Right, they aren't meant to be a solo cure. They are the ultimate partner to make other treatments work.
Exactly. But the second shift is the technological infrastructure. And we need to spend some time here.
We really do. We are seeing artificial intelligence move from being a flashy narrative, like just a buzzword, to being the actual infrastructure of drug discovery.
Okay.
By 2025, AI-driven drug discovery drew around $11 billion in funding. Capital is reallocating massively toward computation-native biotech.
Okay, we need to de-jargon computation native or AI native because it is so easy to just slap the word AI onto a company and call it innovative. What does it actually mean for a biotech startup to be AI native?
Historically, drug discovery was mostly trial and error in a wet lab. You mix chemicals or biological agents in petri dishes, wait weeks or months to see what happens, fail, and try again.
Very slow.
Incredibly slow and ridiculously expensive. Being AI native means computation changes what biology can be designed in the first place. Think about breakthroughs like AlphaFold, which allowed computers to predict the 3D structure of proteins.
Right, because proteins are essentially complex biological origami, and their shape dictates what they do in the body.
Exactly. And AI models now understand the language of biology. Just as a language model predicts the next word in a sentence, these biological models predict how a viral protein will physically fold, how it will interact with a human cell receptor, and how stable it will be.
Oh, wow. So you're not doing this in a petri dish first.
No. You are running millions of simulations of viral mutations in a computer in a matter of hours. You're finding the safest and most effective design before you ever touch a test tube.
You're running the trial and error process at the speed of microchips, not at the speed of biological growth.
In complex engineered modalities like oncolytic viruses, iteration speed and the quality of your design dictate whether the virus goes rogue or stays safe. That computational advantage compounds incredibly fast. You are designing a virus with safeguards built into its very code, predicting its behavior mathematically.
Okay, so we have the maturing virus science, and we have AI as the new infrastructure that allows us to design these safe, precise biological weapons.
Right.
But the third shift is geopolitical. I mean, Nucleovir isn't in Boston or San Francisco. It's in Bengaluru. Why is India emerging as a strategic powerhouse for building these advanced therapeutics?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is about strategic autonomy. Usually when we talk about a nation's autonomy, we're talking about defense hardware, right?
Like manufacturing your own
Okay.
submarines, your own fighter jets, securing energy grids, steel and silicon, not biology.
Exactly. But the most advanced medicines of the 21st century, cell therapies, gene therapies, AI-engineered viruses are becoming just as strategically important.
Because it's literally life or death.
A country that relies entirely on importing these advanced treatments is dependent on Western pharma companies, their pricing, their patents, and their supply chains for the basic survival of its own citizens.
It's the most intimate form of dependency possible, relying on another nation to keep your population alive.
The proof that India can break this dependency is already here, though. The sources highlight a crucial real-world example from October 2023, NextCAR19.
Oh, right.
This was India's first indigenous CAR T-cell therapy to receive approval.
And CAR-T is another highly advanced immunotherapy, right? Where they extract a patient's immune cells, genetically alter them in a lab to fight cancer, and put them back in.
Yes. And in the United States, a single CAR-T treatment can cost between $400,000 and $500,000 per patient.
$500,000 for one patient.
It is prohibitively expensive, which means it is completely inaccessible to the vast majority of the world. But with NextCAR19, India proved it could develop and manufacture that exact same class of complex therapy locally, and they brought the cost down to roughly $40,000 to $50,000.
That is a staggering difference. That's a tenth of the cost. They didn't just manufacture yesterday's generic pill, they built frontier biology at a fraction of the price.
Manufacturing economics ultimately dictate whether a brilliant scientific discovery stays as a niche science experiment for the ultra-wealthy or becomes medicine at scale for the population. Nucleover is betting that India can repeat that exact same success with engineered viruses.
Okay, hold on a second. I need to pause you there because I want to play skeptic for a minute.
Sure, let's hear it.
It is so easy to get swept up in this romantic vision of AI curing cancer in Bengaluru and disrupting global healthcare costs. But we're talking about a company founded in late 2024 that is currently only in animal validation studies.
That's true.
We've seen 100 companies cure cancer perfectly in mice, but fail miserably when put into humans. Why should we believe a 2-year-old startup can actually translate this to human trials?
It is a formidable hurdle. Mice are not humans, and the graveyard of oncology is totally full of failed promises. Drug development typically takes well over a decade and hundreds of millions of dollars to get from a mouse model to an approved drug in a hospital.
Right. And they're up against huge players.
Exactly. And the regulatory frontier for novel engineered viruses is incredibly demanding everywhere in the world.
Plus, they are not operating in a vacuum. We established earlier there are more than 200 active oncolytic virus trials running worldwide right now. They are up against massive Western pharmaceutical companies with billions in capital, armies of researchers, and years of a head start. Is an AI-native approach and India's lower cost base really enough of an edge?
What you are describing is exactly why this is a high-risk endeavor, but we have to look at the specific team executing this.
Okay, tell me about the team.
Nucleover is led by Yogesh, who has extensive doctoral and postdoctoral training in multidisciplinary sciences from places like the Max Planck Institute. Then you have Ayush, who brings a rare blend of quantitative and biological depth genomics, host pathogen biology from institutions like Caltech and Harvard.
And crucially, they brought in Sunil. Right.
Yeah.
He has deep operating experience in biologics and vaccine manufacturing.
Yes.
Our sources specifically note that having an execution layer for manufacturing this early in a startup is actually pretty rare.
It's vital because engineered viruses are notoriously fragile and difficult to produce safely and consistently at scale. You can design the most beautiful, precise virus on a computer screen using AI. But if you can't actually brew it in a bioreactor at scale without it falling apart or mutating,
And you don't have a drug.
exactly, you have a
Yeah.
very expensive academic paper. By integrating manufacturing awareness into their design from day one, they are addressing the exact chasm where most biotech startups fail.
So the argument is that the leaders of the next generation of oncology won't necessarily be the ones who just threw the most money at the wall. They will be defined by capital efficiency.
Absolutely.
Building an AI-native biotech in India means they can pursue world-class, bleeding-edge science at a fraction of the burn rate of a comparable startup in Boston or the Bay Area.
If a U.S. company makes a mistake in the lab, it might cost them $10 million. If Nucleover makes a mistake, the financial penalty is significantly lower, giving them much more runway to iterate, learn, and let their AI models compound their advantage. It is a highly calculated bet on the convergence of talent, computation, and manufacturing economics.
So if we step back and look at the bigger picture here, what does this actually mean for the future of our healthcare? We started with a medical mystery from over 100 years ago. Doctors watching completely by chance as everyday viruses attacked tumors. For a century, that phenomenon was an untamable accident.
Today, through the lens of a startup like Nucleovir Therapeutics, we see how that accident is being reverse engineered.
Yeah.
By utilizing an AI-native platform, they are designing oncolytic viruses from the ground up. These viruses are built to infiltrate cold tumors, the dead zones of the immune system responsible for our most lethal cancers like glioblastoma, destroy them from the inside, and fire a molecular flare that turns the tumor into a vaccine against itself.
They are attempting to strip off the invisibility cloak and finally give our immune system a target. In doing this in India represents a fundamental shift in strategic autonomy. It proves that a nation's security isn't just in the sky or the sea, it's on the cellular frontier inside the human body.
It really is.
The deadliest cancers have stubbornly refused to budge for a century. The survival rates for glioblastoma are as grim today as they were decades ago. But somewhere right now, running on a server, the biological codes to finally beat them are likely being compiled. The AI is learning. The viruses are being mapped.
It is a marathon that is just beginning, fraught with clinical risks and massive regulatory hurdles. But as these engineered cures transition from science fiction into clinical reality, it leaves us with a haunting question about the future.
What's that?
Will access to these hyper-advanced AI-designed viruses become the ultimate dividing line in the 21st century? Because when the cure to the most devastating cold tumors is finally engineered, when the 100-year mystery is officially solved, the greatest tragedy wouldn't be that the cure doesn't exist. The greatest tragedy would be that only half the world can afford to import it.